he is probably not ready to hear it. A terminally ill patient will gradually feel loss on many levels, including loss of physical abilities and the independence to perform even the most minimal of tasks. A dying person also feels a loss of a lifetime of plans and expectations. Dr. Peter Kay powerfully makes this point when he states, giving up hopes and dreams for the future can be more difficult than giving up objects which actually exist. As devotees, we may be anxious for the patient to quickly accept her terminal condition so she can get on with the business of spiritually preparing for death. But for the caregiver, patience is once again required at this time. Continued denial, however, can eventually become inappropriate and detrimental to one who is facing imminent death. Denial becomes inappropriate if it does not assist in the patient's adaptation to his illness or when it hinders other adjustments, such as practical, financial, emotional, and spiritual alterations. Its persistence becomes harmful when it causes additional anguish to the patient, family, and caregiver. It can also cause harm when it keeps the patient from accepting palliative treatment, such as pain medication. Trust your instincts and you will know when your patient's denial has extended to an inappropriate length of time. Talking to a patient or loved one who is in denial about approaching death must be done delicately and with kindness. To test the extent of patient's denial, ask, can you tell me what the doctor said about your illness? The same question can be adjusted to test the denial of a loved one. Remember that there are many intricate layers of someone's denial. Each covering must be gently lifted with care. However, this does not mean that you offer false hope of recovery. If a patient is deceived in this way, he may lose trust in his caregivers when he feels himself growing weaker. It may also prevent him from settling any unfinished business. This state is not an easy time for the caregiver. There is a very thin line between gently uncovering someone's denial and misleading him. I always found it helpful to tell my patients at this stage, of course, the Lord can always intervene, but at this point, your medical reports show you have a very serious illness. In this way, I never completely took away their hope, which is something Dr. Kubler-Ross suggests, but I never misled them either. It should be noted that a patient often exhibits what has been termed intellectualizing, which is the ability of the patient to describe the technical aspects surrounding his illness while not yet connecting it on an emotional level. For example, she might be able to explain to her spouse that a cancer has metastasized to the liver, lungs, and bone. In fact, she may verbalize this in a matter-of-fact manner and appear to those around her to have accepted her prognosis. Still, this individual remains in denial. As a caregiver, support the patient and assist her in understanding her fate on an emotional level, so her grief work can begin. If you are receiving assistance from a hospice agency, ask your hospice nurse to step in if prolonged denial becomes a problem in any way, either with the patient or family members. An experienced hospice nurse should be able to confront those involved so that the hospice care and the comfort of the patient is not hindered. In time, most patients reach a point where denial no longer rescues them, and speaking about their fears offers a sense of relief.
Thank you so much. This is Rita. And we discuss, this is a very intense topic, denial. And does anybody have any questions about this before we move on? Because it's such an intense topic. Any questions or comments? It's a very difficult stage, like I said, for the patient as well as the caregivers and family.
Haribol,
Yes.
I have a comment about denial.
Okay. Who is this?
Sorry, it's Kavita from Canada.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances and Haribol to the group.
Please accept mine.
Just in my work experience, as a social worker working with people with chronic disease for many years, and then also as a therapist, I think with denial, I think with all of this is that it's very much a process. And I've seen people kind of oscillate, move between periods of denial and little glimmers of clarity and acceptance, and how over time they can move into a place of sort of acceptance, and that it's really very much a process as opposed to just waking up one day and just having total acceptance. And then as a devotee, I think that there's sometimes, I mean, just personally, given my current circumstances with my mom being palliative, there's almost sort of like, if you express any kind of anticipatory grief or any emotional distress, it's really minimized because then you're being attached, and we shouldn't be attached to anything, which is a whole other issue. But with denial, I've seen people really sort of move and evolve over time, both family members and the individual. Okay, Haribol.
What just happened?
I said Haribol and I finished my comment.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm very hard of hearing because I'm diabetic. It's making me deaf. So I didn't know whether you were finished or something just happened. I appreciate your comment. Thank you very much. But one thing you said, which we should one day continue, is that it's true that some devotees will say to the dying devotee, that they're attached. Why are you so attached? Why, when someone is in denial? I've seen it. But you know what? The movement in general is getting better at that. It used to be a lot worse, believe me, trust me. In the old days, it was a lot worse. And we're getting a lot better as a society in general. We're maturing, and we're getting a lot kinder with one another in general, and in these terminal situations. We are getting a lot better. I mentioned this before. When I was writing this book in 1999, I was afraid that I was going to get very criticized for being so emotional and bringing up topics. And believe it or not, I was not criticized for it. A lot of devotees were very relieved to read these. So I appreciate that comment. But yeah, we have a long way to go, but we've come very far as that goes. But I do appreciate you mentioning it, because yeah, we do have a long way to go. I think as we do mature in general as a society and personally, it is getting better. But yeah, as a therapist, it would be great if you could uh, teach us as a whole how to deal with that subject. When we hear and see devotees being pressured in that way, when we're faced with a prognosis of 6 months or less, that's the last thing we need, is to hear that we're attached to the body. That's the last thing. We're dealing with so much stress, so much pressure, so much uh, emotional issues. And it is a process, and it takes time, and we shouldn't be pressured into coming to conclusions that we're not ready for yet. So I think that's a great topic, and I'd like to hear from you further as we read on. So thank you very much for that. Should we go on with reading about anger, talking about the process? This is one of the stages that some terminally ill people in general, not just devotees, but everyone might get to eventually, is this anger process, anger stage. So is there anyone that would like to read?
I can continue. This is Mother Karuna.
Oh, okay, thank you.
A person often moves from the denial stage to the anger stage. But again, this is not always the case. Of all the stages in the grief process, anger can be the most difficult to cope with, both for the person feeling angry and those who are the recipients of that anger. A patient may become angry when he or she realizes that death is nearing. Family members or close friends may become angry when they realize that someone dear to them will soon be gone. Because of this, anger can create a disturbance in one's support system by alienating family and friends. It is not unusual for a terminal illness to create a restructuring of family members and a change in roles. Time previously spent between some family members may lessen, while others may spend more time together, caring for and visiting with the ill patient. While good communication helps all concerned to adjust to these changes, anger weakens healthy communication between loved ones. For the patient, the anger phase may be a time of asking questions such as, why me? Or why has the Lord done this to me? Anger may also be a way of masking fear. As a caregiver who spends much of your time with the patient, you will naturally be the recipient of much of this anger. In turn, this may cause anger in you as you feel you're unappreciated and being treated unfairly. If this occurs, remind yourself that the patient is not angry with you, but at the situation. The patient is becoming more dependent on you and others as each day passes. This sense of helplessness may feel unbearable at times and may exhibit itself through angry outbursts. Remind yourself that these outbursts are a sign of the patient going through the grief process. Try to imagine how you would react in a similar situation. It is especially important at this stage that you, the caregiver, receive assistance from others who can allow you to step out of the situation for a short time, collect your thoughts, and then return to your caregiver responsibilities more refreshed.
Is there anyone else would like to continue, or Mataji can continue if you like?
Bargaining. Typically, the next stage in the grief process is when one makes promises or attempts to enter into an agreement of some kind in order to prolong life. In a sense, the terminally ill patient now negotiates for more time. Promises are often made to the Lord, especially when a patient feels he has not lived up to the spiritual standards that were expected of him. For instance, the patient may pray, if you allow me to live longer, I'll spend more time reading the scriptures. Not only will someone make promises to the Lord, but may pledge to family members to change bad habits in his life in the hope of prolonging his life. He may try to mend the damaged relationship, thinking God will be pleased and grant his desire to live longer. The bargaining stage of grief is a most unfortunate phase for the patient and is painful for the caregivers to watch. As with the other stages, loved ones may also experience a type of bargaining, thinking it may allow them more time with the patient. As a caregiver, encourage the patient or loved one to verbalize his or her feelings. Bargaining is often associated with guilt. If the object of guilt is communicated and dealt with, it may help to resolve this stage more easily. Once again, good communication is required to decrease anxiety for all concerned.
Can I just add something? That all these stages, they used to be thought of as carved in stone. You know, every dying person goes through this, and they go through it in this way, in this order. But over time, those working in this field understood that patients don't necessarily go through these stages. they don't necessarily go through them in this order, and they can go through these stages and then go back and repeat them. So you can be angry and you can be bargaining and begging God, begging the doctor, begging your family, your friends. You know, you're making all kinds of deals, you're wheeling and dealing for more time. And then you go back to being in denial again when your loved ones thought you had been already through that. And then you all of a sudden you're going through it again. So it can go around and around and around. It's not a linear process. In other words, you don't just go through it once and then move on to the next stage. It's like in a circle, and you can go through it again and again. Or you can skip over one of these stages and not go through it at all. My mother-in-law, who I wrote about in the book, never went through denial. She was a very, very strict Catholic. She had a lot of faith in God, and she understood what was given to her, this test, and she had cancer and she was dying, and she accepted it. She never went through denial. So, you know, everyone has their own way of going through processing their diagnosis and prognosis. And that's how she chose to deal with it. But, you know, she never went through bargaining. She just prayed a lot, and everyone will have their own way. So you and they're not necessarily saying to themselves or to their caregivers, oh, now I'm depressed, now I'm angry, now I'm back in denial again. You know, they don't know these stages, they don't know how to label them. So you as a caregiver are educated now, you're going to be educated, and if you take the course, you're going to be even more educated, and you're going to be able to read these signs, and you'll be very aware that your patient is in this stage, that stage, now they're back in this stage again. You're going to be able to see the signs, and you'll be very, very knowledgeable and aware that this is what they're going through. And these are the questions you can ask them so that they will become more aware, and it will be more helpful to them to help them to move on and to come to this stage of acceptance, because that's the goal of this process, is to help them to accept what's going on, what's happening, and how to get them to accept the inevitable. Okay, so that's the goal of this time for you and the patient and the family and those around who really love the patient. Everyone should come to the stage of acceptance. It's healthy for them and it's healthy for the patient. Okay, so there's tons of books out there on these stages, and there's lots of other in the course that we have online, and in the workbook. We mention a lot of other um, grief processes, not just Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's. There are many other grief processes that you'll find that your patients will go through and exhibit. So you'll be able to recognize all of them. Okay. It's not that difficult. It really isn't. When you have lots of experience taking care of the devotees or loved ones or friends, you'll get very used to seeing these processes and stages, and it'll become very natural for you to recognize them. All right. Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to continue?
Sorry, Bull, I can read if nobody else wants to.
Sure.
Sure, I see Shamalota wanted to raise her hand, but sure.
Oh
go-
yeah, please let her go ahead then.
Okay, thank you. Shamalota Mataji, thank you.
Thank you. Acceptance. The final phase of the grief process is acceptance. It is time of resolution and
I
inner
think we're
peace.
on the depression.
Oh, we are in depression. Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, depression. After the bargaining stage, a terminally ill patient, as well as family members, may become depressed. Depression is the beginning of realizing that death will soon occur. For the patient, this usually arises when symptoms worsen. She becomes weaker and is more dependent on others. This is the time she may experience a tremendous sense of loss, as her independence decreases. As with the other stages of grief, a change in family roles plays a key part in depression, as well as the absence of a job or a particular devotional service that the patient was attached to performing. Beyond feeling reactionary depression, because of these types of losses, a person experiences what is referred to as preparatory depression, as she realizes impending death is near. Sometimes it is difficult to distinguish between a depressed patient and one experiencing an advanced illness, because many of the signs of depression, such as difficulty sleeping, decreased appetite, weakness, and fatigue, are seen in both situations. If the person has a previous medical history of depression, it is not uncommon for him to experience it in the terminal stage. Yet, even when the person does not have a history of depression, he may still become depressed at this stage of his grief work. Surprisingly, comments about suicide are not necessarily a sign of depression in a dying patient. They may simply be a way of communicating to others the severe emotional anguish he is experiencing. It may also be an attempt to retain some time of control in his life. In any case, sadness for some time is a natural part of dying for the conditioned soul and may be necessary in order to reach the stage of acceptance. Once again, the caregiver's listening skills and empathy are required. Often, so this stage of grief is a quiet one. Someone who is dying may simply need your silent yet a strong presence as a source of comfort.
Kavita, would you like to continue?
Me?
Haribo.
Yes, Kavita. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Acceptance.
Mm.
The final phase of the grief process is acceptance. It is a time of resolution and inner peace, both for the patient and family members experiencing it. The dying patient is now able to truly focus on the self and become detached from the worldly events surrounding her. Verbal communication will decrease. She may also exhibit detachment from loved ones. This is sometimes emotionally traumatic for those who cannot comprehend what the patient is experiencing. I have often explained to hospice families that at this stage, it is as if the patient has one foot in this world and one foot in the next. After a great deal of work, she is finally ready to face death. I am always in awe upon observing a patient who has successfully achieved this state of awareness. For a Vaishnava, this is the most glorious of times because she has completed her grief work and is now free to fully concentrate on remembering the Lord. At times, the patient may express a desire to be left alone. As a caregiver, we need to respect and facilitate the patient's need for solitude. These private moments become very precious to one who is facing death. As long as the patient is able to make his desires known, it is best to allow him choices. For the Vaishnava patient, ask if he would like to hear a bhajan tape or if someone can visit and quietly chant Hare Krishna or read aloud scripture. As the patient becomes more quiet and internal, the atmosphere in the room should reflect his consciousness. Lighting should be kept dim in the evening, voices chanting, and music should be soft and peaceful. One of the caregiver's duties at this time is to explain to loved ones that the patient's silence reflects tranquility and a sense of peace that comes from surrendering to the Lord's will. It is a time to rejoice for the Vaishnava who has come so far in preparing to die. After discussing how we adults may experience the 5 stages of grief, we need to turn our attention to a much younger group who may respond in a different manner to anticipatory grieving. Do you want me to continue?
Sure. Thank you.
When young children are involved, in general, Vaishnava children hear about death and dying from an early age because preparing one's consciousness for the time of death is an integral part of the Krishna conscious philosophy. However, when a young child must watch someone die who was close to her, she will have her own understanding of the situation depending on age, cognitive development, and emotional maturity level. It is believed that infants also grieve. When someone has been consistently present in a baby's life, he will have a sense of something missing from when that caregiver passes away. The baby will probably cry more, may have trouble sleeping, and at times may be inconsolable. Being held and cradled when a grieving baby cries will reassure him that he is still loved and safe. Young children exhibit grief more through behavior than words. For example, a child who is easily upset may be feeling confused but simply lacks the words to verbalize his uncertainty. A child who is angry because of the patient's terminal condition might misbehave more frequently or argue with others. Watch for conduct that is out of character for the child as clues to deeper feelings. Also, for children, grief may be exhibited through play. Those around the child should be aware of games with themes surrounding death and immortality. Conversations children have while pretending to role play may reveal hidden emotions. Artwork may also disclose thoughts and feelings that the child is unable to verbalize. Children must be allowed to grieve in their own way and not have to conform to adult ideas concerning grief. Allow the child opportunities to ask questions about the terminal condition of the patient. Young children often think that someone's illness and ensuing death may be their fault. They may harbor feelings of guilt and require reassurance that they did not cause the situation. Krishna consciousness assists those of all ages to transcend material grief, but a grieving child requires an enormous amount of emotional sensitivity on our part, so unresolved issues do not surface in adulthood. Young children often find it easier to discuss disturbing events when they are physically engaged in other activities, such as playing with toys or dolls and not looking directly at the adult who is speaking with them. For instance, you may find an opportune moment to discuss concerns about a loved one's illness while the child is drawing or coloring. If the child has a bedtime ritual, such as storytelling or discussing the day's events, he or she may feel secure at this time and more willing to share thoughts and feelings. Since the developmental stage of a child affects his or her concept of death, I've included the following brief summaries of various age groups, their cognitive understanding of death, and possible signs of distress.
Is there anyone else who would like to continue? I saw Radhana raising her hand.
Yes, I could go ahead and read.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Ages 2 to 4. Children at this age are self-centered and literally think that the world revolves around them. This is the preconceptual stage when they are unable to grasp concepts. Death is seen as abandonment, reversible, and non-permanent. Anxieties may exhibit themselves through regression of certain behaviors, such as wanting to be fed, asking to drink from a bottle instead of a cup, and bedwetting. 5 to 7. Children at this age are gaining more independence while exploring the world outside of the self. They are expanding their use of language. They tend to ask many why questions. Children at this age may feel guilty because they link thoughts with events. For example, if the child was once angry and wished harm on the loved one who is now terminally ill, he may feel responsible for causing the patient's disease. This is a time when fantasy is believed to be true. Death is seen as reversible. Anxieties may be revealed through role play. Children at this age may experience nightmares and be more violent in their play. Ages 8 to 11. Children at this age are entering the beginning of logical thinking. Death is seen as punishment. They are beginning to see death as irreversible and final. Anxieties may cause problems with concentration in school. They may isolate themselves from others. They may experience disturbances with sleep. They may worry about how life will change after the death of a loved one. For example, they may become overly concerned about having to move to a new home or even to a new city, leaving behind family and friends. These adjustments become secondary losses to the already traumatic event of losing someone dear to them. Ages 12 to 18. This age group can now problem solve and is capable of abstract thinking. They are capable of conceptualizing death and to make sense of it on their own terms in combination with what they have been taught throughout childhood. Anxieties can manifest through depression and anger. Adolescents may isolate themselves while at home, spending more time in their bedroom. It is sometimes easier for children at this age to talk about the situation to those outside the family. It is important to note that children grieve in cycles throughout childhood. In fact, their grief work may continue throughout life. At each new level of development throughout childhood and adolescence, they reprocess past significant events through the lens of newly acquired maturity and cognitive abilities. For example, a baby who loses a parent may re-experience his grief when he begins to develop language skills and can verbalize his feelings of loss. When reaching adolescence, he may process the loss again using his newly developed capacity for abstract thinking. Important milestones in life will cause the sense of loss to resurface. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, and other rites of passage are sad reminders of his missing loved one.
Okay,
Do you want- Yeah, go ahead.
excuse me, can I just add something? This is an important point. When a child loses a parent, let's say the mom dies, when they're 10 years old, and then they go on, they grieve in their own way as a 10-year-old, and then they start middle school, then they go into high school. There's another grief, okay, because they can't share that rite of passage into high school with mom. And then they go into, graduation. Where's mom? Then they go into college. I want to tell mom I got into the college of my dreams. Then they graduate from college. Where's mom? Okay, so, then we're at the wedding. Where's mom? So again and again and again, there's loss of mom throughout life. Then they have a baby. I wish my mother was here with me. Okay, so that's what I'm saying here, is that the loss continues throughout life at all the events that child will go through as he or she grows up. Mom isn't there. And so that loss will continue throughout life. It's very sad, actually. It's not just when the death happens. It will continue throughout special events in that child's life as he or she grows up. It's a sad situation when a parent dies, especially when the child's young and then experiences that loss over and over and over again. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you go on? I just wanted to reiterate that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Do you want me to continue, or does somebody else want to finish the last paragraph?
No, can you please continue?
Sure. The role of the caregiver. For adults and children alike, a terminal illness creates an upheaval for all concerned. It is often the caregiver who bears the weight of that turbulence. You may find yourself going from the patient's room to the living room only to become aware of family members who need your strength and guidance just as much as the patient will. As a caregiver, gather your emotional and spiritual strength so you can be a source of strength and comfort to those around you. However, in the midst of upholding everyone else, do not neglect your own sense of loss. You have the right to grieve in your own unique way as well.
Yeah, if you're, this is a devotee, let's say, in your community that you're helping with, and you've been friends with that devotee, and you're friends with the family, you have some grief of your own. So there you are, helping with the family, and you go home and don't forget to grieve yourself. Okay. Don't forget your own loss. Okay.
Yeah, self-care is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we'll stop here because we ran out of time. And this is a good time, this is a good place to stop because we're starting a whole new chapter next week on pain management and the use of allopathic medicine. It's a big chapter, but we're gonna start it next week.
Yeah, this is an important chapter because there's so many devotees that are not into allopathic pain medicine until they're diagnosed with a terminal disease. And then they call me up and say, Sangeeta, what can I take for the pain? And that has happened so many times. But, I don't wish the pain on anyone, but there are some solutions for it. And if the hospice staff is well trained, if they are well trained, then there's a solution to the issues that most devotees have with this type of medicine, and it can be given carefully, and it can be titrated, given slowly and correctly, so that you're not laying in bed totally with your consciousness unable to think of Krishna. Your pain is well controlled, and it's given correctly so that you can meditate on Krishna and chant and hear and read and listen to Prabhupada and others give class, and your consciousness will be steady and on the Lord, and you'll still be I can't say pain-free because that's not always possible, but it will be hopefully you'll be how's a good way to say it? You'll be your pain will be as controlled as possible, and you'll be as comfortable as possible given your disease. Okay, so it's a good chapter to start next week. So you'll be better aware of what hospice can provide for your patient. All right.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, again for joining us this week, and we're looking forward to next week's reading.
Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Hare
Hare
Bol.
Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank
Haribol.
you.
Hare
Hare
Bol.
Krishna.
Hare
Take care,
Krishna.
everybody.
All glories to Srila
Jai
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada.
Hare Bol. Hare Bol.
Prabhupada.